week into Auburn football fall practice, but there's still plenty to talk about, and much of that comes from when we get to listen to the press conferences, whether it be from players, but especially from Coach Bryan Harsin. In his latest press conference about a week into practice, there's more to talk about, more questions to ask, more clarifications. So that's what we're going to dive into in this video, the latest press conference for Coach Bryan Harsin and what the beat reporters asked him, what he answered, and the info that he's given. And we're going to discuss it a little bit, my thoughts on this. So as I always like to stress in these type of videos, if you haven't watched the press conference in full, I encourage you to do so because you're going to get the full context of everything that is said, that was asked there, because I'm going to give you the summary here. This is just a video for those of you that may not have the time to listen to the whole press conference, but just want a quick overview of what's happened with a little bit of speculation, interpretation on top of it from myself. So we'll do this just like we did last time, where I've got my notes here in front of me with each question, a couple of bullet points about what was said, and then a little bit of just, speculation on my part. So question number one, overall evaluation of camp so far. Coach said that he thought today specifically, Monday, was one of their better practices. The word that I used to describe this was Christmas, in going drill to drill, area to area, whatever they were trying to get done that day. Because Coach has said, and he reiterated in this press conference, that there's a lot of conditioning that they do during practice, moving from area to area, drill to drill. So a lot of that was happening, a lot of crispness. This was just an overall better practice in a lot of different ways. And they've had a few hard practices as well, he said, which you would expect in the first couple of days, trying to get things ready. A lot of studying happening from the players, but there's still a lot to be learned, a lot to be more fine-tuned, and more consistency to be had. Evaluation of the secondary. So he's very happy with this overall, and he even took the opportunity to talk about the wide receivers here too, which tells you a lot about these two groups and the progress they seem to be making in fall camp. Noted that they're running a lot when they're at practice, whether that be in plays or in the drills that they're type of doing. And there has been very few, if any, complaints from them. Says a lot about that. These are two areas where there's a lot of big personalities a lot of times, wide receivers and defensive backs, especially defensive backs, it seems like a lot these days. So those guys not complaining about the running, maybe extra running they're having to do, is a good sign for them in terms of morale. Pointed out a couple of guys that stood out to him. One, which is a newcomer, Keontae Scott, who we've talked about previously. And then people you'd expect. Jeremiah Pritchett, Jalen Simpson, standing out in terms of the veterans. Question three, Camden Brown is more specifically about the young wide receiver group who's standing out to you, but they specifically asked about Camden Brown. So Camden Brown has a lot of size, Coach acknowledged, and so does Landon King, and that's the two guys that they look at in terms of give them a specific set that they can start kind of visualizing around and how to utilize their particular measurables, their particular skill set. Those guys are two of them that stand out to him. Also brought up Omari Kelly and how consistent he's been with his hands overall. Jay Fair and Tavares Dawson also got mentioned as standing out as well. Moreover on that, the next question was about Tavares Dawson. It's a lot of us wondering what's made, or what was made of last year. Remember, there was a lot of talk about him coming out of fall camp, and it didn't really come over onto the field in terms of legitimate playing time. He said that a lot of that was about maturity, learning how to mature in several different areas of being a football player at the college level specifically, and settling into what you need to do to earn that starting time. Just not enough to have the talent. You got to be able to be trusted to put that talent on the field, and that comes through maturing in a variety of different ways, and what he's been evaluating and him doing, especially his techniques cleaned up a little bit in terms of what he needs to do as a smaller receiver to be more formidable and get his talent out there. All right, next we got the question of how quickly are going decisions be made in terms of depth chart. They didn't say they wanted a depth chart, just kind of wanted to know when some decisions were going to be made. Coach stressed these decisions are always being made. However, they are not going to have probably anything until after the first scrimmage, and definitely the second scrimmage is where they'll start making some of those bigger, tougher decisions about who is going to be a big contributor this year. Now, they are having conversations like in between, like if it started today, what would you do? Who would you utilize in this particular situation? Those conversations are always happening, but obviously no depth chart yet. Was asked about Zach Calzada specifically because there's been a lot of questions about whether or not he's been having good practices or not, how he's coming along with his injury and things like that. People are asking if there's rust based off things that they're seeing in those open periods for viewing by the media. And he said it's not really rust, it's just getting accustomed to being back in this practice mode of seeing different sets, all that kind of stuff that he's been missing out on because he hasn't been able to fully do that while he's been coming back from his injury. He did say that he's been having a couple of good days, especially this last practice. That's the theme that you'll hear is like, today was the practice that stood out for the team, but for a lot of different individuals. So good day for him, checking a lot of boxes. Also said that Holdengruner is stepping up a little bit, not in terms of maybe earning starting time. He didn't specifically say that. That's just what I interpret. But at least the progression that he's making early is a good sign for him overall. Also, I'll kind of skip ahead to another question since it's kind of related. Was asked about Robbie's progress because he's been getting a lot of notoriety from the coaches, especially getting like player of the day on offense and stuff like that because they put it up in the practice facility and their meeting rooms who's practicing well that day. So Robbie's decision making is really what is setting him up for success long term. Does that mean winning the starting job? We obviously don't know yet, but that's really what's setting him apart, and he's getting a stronger and stronger and stronger command of the offense. I like what I'm hearing out of him. We'll see what happens with the rest of the race. TJ's also had a good practice or two, and so that's kind of where we stand in terms of questions being asked about the quarterback race. Anders Carlson injury. How is he? Is his strength bad? Coach Harsin said, well, it sure does look like it because he's doing really well out there in all aspects, kicking, kickoffs, wearing his brace still for kickoffs, which to me kind of is, I'm a former kicker, so I have some perspective on this a little bit. To me, it seems like it would just be more of like kind of a mind thing, like it's just an extra care. Like even for basketball now, I still wear these, loose braces on, not loose, but just small braces on my ankles because I've had so many bad ankle injuries, and it's just for peace of mind. They really probably don't do anything for me. Just pure speculation on my part. Evan McGuire apparently looking very good on kickoffs, just in case that does not continue to progress the way we want. And Evan McPherson, still very young, he says, but showing a lot of promise in practice. Back to some discussion about the wide receiver group. We've got a lot of people asking questions about this and the impact of Coach Hilliard on that. Coach has already seen the impact of his assistant coach in that room. Really comes from his leadership that he provides and passing that off onto the rest of the guys in that group, seeing Zevion Capers, step up in a big way in that particular area. Asked about starting at home and what's the excitement and the expectations around that. Obviously, we as fans have expectations about those first 5 home games in a row. Believe it or not, they talked about this in the press conference. Ohio State also has 5 home games in a row. So do with that information what you will, just a little bit of a fun fact for your middle of the week. But in terms of that huge opportunity, Coach said, and it's something that they don't want to take lightly. It can be a detriment, though, he pointed out, because you're not in that traditional where you maybe have 2 home games and an away game, or 2 away games and a home game, and then back to away games, where you kind of get maybe in a pattern or rhythm of stuff. You're going to be getting used to all this stuff at home, and then all of a sudden going over to away games basically in the middle of your season. So it's not that it's a detriment, it's just something that they're going to have to account for and be ready to adjust for. He was asked about defensive transfer guys that are standing out to him. He pointed out 3 guys: Morris Joseph, Craig McDonald, and Darren Bragg. Now, Morris, a lot of people in his mind, Coach said, don't look at him as a extremely athletic guy, but he says he really packs a punch and is standing out with his practice habits. Craig McDonald seems to be getting better and better from recovering from that foot injury that he had and looks to contribute. Same thing with Darren Bragg, contributing on offense and with the special teams. Donovan Kaufman questions again. There's a lot of excitement about this guy in the media, fan-wise, so there are a lot of questions about him. He's seen day-to-day improvements in terms of growth for him, and he's found his process in terms of what he needs to do on a day-to-day basis to continue to get better, whether that is on special teams, whether that is on defense. Just looks to be one of those dynamic guys that you can utilize in any different aspect. He was asked about players being very vocal about the creativity that they're seeing in the offense this year. And that's what we're hoping for, right? A little bit of different something. And the players are already talking about it. Coach said that, listen, we've been trying to do that this whole time, and we probably could have done it better last year. The difference is that we've had a whole year now to learn about these guys that stayed, get the guys that didn't necessarily want to be here or were good fits out of here. And you kind of earn that flexibility to be utilized in different ways in the offense, right? It's not just from production on the field, it's production off the field too. What you do in the weight room, what you do in meeting sessions, what you do in terms of school and stuff. You got to earn that stuff. And so that creativity that you're hearing expressed is probably not just because they're trying more things, but because the players are earning it. And then that's more of a speculation part for me. Talked about the chip on the shoulder for the team, whether it be the players, the coaches, or overall. And this is in regards, look, to what happened in the offseason, the way the season ended, just the whole mess of, that was 2021 to now at this point that Auburn's dealt with in terms of perception, all that kind of stuff. Coach said, yeah, it can be a motivating factor, but you can kind of get too focused on those things that kind of get you mad and stuff like that. You really got to find something to motivate you beyond just that, because when the lights, go out and stuff like that, you got to find something that motivates you in practice, in the classroom, all that kind of stuff. So the chip can be valuable, but not necessarily something that they need to focus on. They need day-to-day motivations and learn to be consistent as human beings. A great quote there. I think it's a good, simple quote for him to throw out there. O-line rotation. At this point, coach says that we're not necessarily just mixing and matching everywhere. Tackles are tackles, guards are guards, centers are centers. It's really just kind of figuring out within those different positions of the offensive line who gives us the best chance to win. And the problem they're having, I kind of sensed a little bit of frustration there, was some guys not being available, whether that's injuries or other things, and not giving them the full gamut of what they need to see to make those decisions. It's kind of some similar things we heard last year at times, which is a little bit disconcerting. But hey, listen, it can't get worse, right? I don't know, I guess it could. Last question, more of a fun one. That Top Gun quarterback video that they made, just something that he talked about they wanted to do to have fun. And it's their way of embracing this idea of the quarterback competition. I kind of like this, I'll be honest with you. I like the fact that coach is taking this head on. We know that everybody's honed on this. The players know it. The coaches know it. Everybody as part of this program knows that that's the big question. Why not just lean right into it, embrace it, and made it kind of a camaraderie thing? And I liked it the way that they focused not just on one quarterback in that video, but made it about all of them in that room, even down to the walk-ons, the ones that, aren't necessarily going to play in terms of what we think we know. So those are your questions. Those are some of the summary of the responses, a little bit of my speculation and kind of takeaways from it. I'd love to know from you what you think about this latest press conference and the things that were talked about. Let me know down in the comment section below. We'll keep that conversation going. But before you head out of here, please do make sure that you smash that like button if you enjoyed this type of content. If you haven't, please do subscribe so you don't miss any of the content, such as our live streams or videos like this. If you want ways to help support our content, listed in the description are many of those. Hit the join button here to become a channel member. Head over to patreon.com to join the Booster Club for $1 a month, and many other ways down there. Thank you for tuning into the E2C Network, where we cover the whole Auburn experience. War Eagle.